We're Winona Fighter.
And you're watching Heavy Consequence.
Hey, you're watching Heavy Consequence, and we're here at Louder Than Life with Winona Fighter. Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Great,
How are
man.
you?
I'm doing well. So you all have had a pretty busy year. You just dropped a new single, is that right?
Yes.
Swear to God I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what went into the writing of that?
Yeah. I wrote that song with Austin, and we were out in LA for a little writing trip, and we wrote it with Jaden.
Yep, Jaden Seeley.
Jaden Seeley. And the whole process behind it was I love this job so much. I am so grateful that we get to do this almost every day. But I have trouble separating it from my personal life, and so whenever I would struggle mentally in my personal life, I would then correlate it with, oh well, then I'm not grateful, or I don't feel fortunate with everything that's going on with the band. And I thought I was kind of alone in that feeling, but I'm not. And so that's how the song kind of came about. And I've definitely learned now that that's not true. But yeah, it was cool. I definitely have a hard time getting personal in sessions, but Jaden made it a really, really comfortable environment, and then we busted out that song.
So Wilburn Street Tavern, I've read that you wrote that to kind of start off your sets and get the pit opened up. So when you're writing a song, how much are you thinking about the performance aspect of that versus your own personal expression?
I would say 100%. Yeah, we write music to perform it live, and not to be recording artists.
Yeah. I say a lot of times we're what do we want the audience to be doing during this
Right.
song? Jumping or moshing or whatever, and then we'll try to write a riff or something around that.
Yeah, and times where they're leaving space, oh, this would be a cool moment where you can engage the crowd in this section or things like that. So yeah, it always factors in.
Now, do you all have a background as punk rock fans? Is that what you sort of grew up listening to?
I think I am the most grew up on the punk rock scene, but I mean we all come from a very eclectic.
Yeah, definitely.
I think we all have some mutual loves where it's all of us listen to The Offspring or Blink or things like that. I would say in terms of my playing and stuff, it's more metal influenced. I know Judas Priest is playing today here. That was a big band for me. Iron Maiden, Metallica, things like that. So that's usually where I tap into the most, I guess, in terms of my playing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I grew up listening to more of maybe my dad's record collection, which is the Cars and Aerosmith and stuff like U2, stuff like that. And then I found Foo Fighters and kind of stuff like that. So now I don't know. I listen to everything except for country music.
Boom, roasted.
Whoops.
Well, Chloe, can you talk a little bit about what drew you into punk rock in the first place? What sort of bands helped you discover it, and what elements and aspects of it drew you in and made you want to be a punk musician yourself?
Yeah, my dad raised me on some pretty great music. Foo Fighters, Pearl Jam, Audioslave. I mean, all those grunge and rock bands from the 90s and early 2000s. I was a big Creed fan, not as a joke.
We can't talk about punk rock without mentioning Creed.
I was a very serious Creed fan as a kid. But from there, I just kind of went down the rabbit hole. I started taking drum lessons in the 3rd grade, and I wanted to hit hard. I didn't want to learn jazzy things, or I didn't want to be the most technical. I wanted to be the hardest, cleanest hitter in the room. And so then I went down the rabbit hole of punk rock. I started with softer stuff and newer stuff like Fall Out Boy, and The Offspring. I would say they were a bit newer on the end of stuff I was listening to. And then from there, I got introduced to the Dead Kennedys, NoFX, Black Flag, and it was game over from there. I grew up in New England, so I'm very familiarized with the Boston punk scene, and I started playing in bands that would play in the scene, and it was bound to happen eventually. I love it. I love it. I think it's the best. 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 I think it's the b the best thing in the world. Yeah.
So coming from the Boston punk scene and then moving to Nashville, a town primarily known for country music, which at least one of the band members here is not a fan of.
You can't escape it.
So what's it like being a heavier band in a town that is really focused mostly on country music? And also, just what's the hardcore scene like down there? What's the DIY scene like?
I mean, the good thing is there obviously is like a big focus on country in a lot of ways, but it is just like Music City. There's a lot of like other artists and great players of all genres that live there. So it is nice to be able to kind of meet both like-minded people and people outside of your genre to kind of get influenced. I mean, like Austin was mentioning, we like a bunch of different kinds of music too, so it's fun to be able to connect with those people. But, you know, the scene is definitely still growing. I feel like when Chloe and I first lived there about 8 years ago, or moved to Nashville about 8 years ago, it was very small, and it's definitely grown a lot. I mean, you mentioned like during COVID, it seemed to kind of explode a bit more, and we definitely like to think of ourselves as some of the flag bearers for the scene, but it's definitely growing, which is nice to see.
Yeah, there's like a couple venue, like there's a venue called Soft Junk that does, I don't know if you would like, yeah, kind of punk DIY shows. So it's like it's happening. You know, you can find little pockets of cool stuff, which makes me hopeful.
Yeah, I would say the punk alternative emo scene is definitely growing, but I would say the DIY scene is still very underground and under wraps, but it's really cool to see DIY bands like ourselves starting to get their chance. Like there's this great band Snooper in Nashville, and they recently signed to Third Man Records, and they're crushing it. So it's if you work hard, there's room to grow and make a name in Nashville for sure.
And you all just recently signed to Rise Records.
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about what it means as a DIY band to have a label that's supporting you?
We found the most like DIY friendly label there is. Like Rise has been nothing but just like we recorded all of the songs you hear in our home studio, just the three of us, and Rise was like, okay, just like let us know when they're done.
Yeah.
And we're like, you don't want to like put your little fingers in it? And they're like, no, just hand it in when it's done. And we're still very DIY. We signed to Rise, and then we did over a month on the road, just us and a drummer, no TM, no merch manager or anything, just the four of us in a van for over a month. And so we're very much still DIY. We just have a label now that elevates us and allows us to do more and reach more people.
And they have like really amazing connections, obviously, too. Different, sync people. Like we're gonna have a song on NHL 2025, which is gonna be insane. I'm from Minnesota originally, so I'm like,
This
oh
guy
my
grew
God.
up with a pair of fucking skates on.
Yeah, I was born with a pair of skates on. So anyways, yeah, it's nice to have like, a team that is awesome.
Yeah, you always hear these horror stories of, oh, we signed to the best label, and then it's like, oh, they're trying to change us, or oh, like they shelved us, or oh, that went downhill fast. And I have to say we're so lucky and we're so fortunate. And I'm not just saying that because they might watch this. It's we're just we're so lucky. Yeah.
That's great. I did want to ask you all what it takes to make it as a DIY band in 2024, because it's not easy out there. It's not easy out there for any band, but to be doing it yourself, like, what does it really take to sustain a band and to find some sort of success and longevity? And also, what kind of advice can you give for like the next generation of artists that are coming up doing these DIY methods?
You have to work really hard. You have to do the day job and then work on the music at night. You have to, make sacrifices, and most importantly, you have to just like shut out the noise and do you, which is very hard, I would say.
I think like being a little bit stubborn too. I mean, like, no, I am gonna keep doing this, even if it might seem like other people are telling you maybe it's time to stop. It's like you kind of have to be stubborn, again, push that noise out and realize like, okay, there might be nobody at the show tonight, but maybe tomorrow there'll be 2 people, and maybe the day after that there'll be 3, and just those kind of incremental growth that you can see and kind of like take those wins but keep pushing through, I think is kind of a big thing to focus on.
if you're comfortable and you're not where you want to be yet, then you're doing something wrong. Like, you should be uncomfortable all the time.
Yeah, and like we record all of our own stuff. We're like self-produced, and I mix everything as well. And so that's obviously a huge money saver. And I would say if you want to do that same thing, it doesn't matter about the gear. It doesn't matter about any of that. Just make sure you have great songs. Because if you look at any band, there's an evolution. You know, their first record is probably gonna kind of sound like shit. Like Queens of the Stone Age, like their first record. I'm not Queens. It doesn't sound like shit, but it's like a huge change, evolution from the what they just put out. And that's kind of cool to see that. You can see the growth in a band. And so if your first record sounds like it was made in a garage, that's kind of sick actually. Because then in 5 years you can put out an actual studio record, and it's like, wow, this band has come so far. So it's kind of, I feel like that's a strength and something cool that people will find interesting.
So last questions. Have you had any acknowledgement from Winona Ryder?
No, we haven't. But we have had our trademark declined, not from Winona Ryder, but Winona Judd. So Mrs. Judd, if you're watching this, please.
Please.
How about Phoebe Bridgers?
That's right.
No acknowledgement for Phoebe Bridgers either. I hope she doesn't think it's a diss track. It's not. Someone came up to me. Dan was there.
True story.
So a guy came up to me in a bar and said, "You look like a drunk version of a Phoebe Bridgers," and I was stone cold sober, and I was like, "What?" Okay.
That's
Tough
something to unpack. I don't know how to take that one.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking about it, and it was a couple years ago. Yeah.
And you've already processed it, created art from it, and still are thinking
and I'm
about it.
still thinking about it. Yeah.